We're holding by Parashat Tetse. Parashat Tetse starts with a story of Eshet Yefat Toar, a man that goes to a war and sees a very attractive woman, and he decides to take her as a wife. The Torah sometimes permits it under certain conditions, but the Torah says that if you do so, there are consequences. That is the next very story in the Torah. The Torah speaks about two women that a man has, one that he loves and one that he hates. Says Rashi that when a man marries a Eshet Yefat Toar, he ends up with such a woman that he hates. And the next story of the Torah, which is connected and comes right afterwards, is Ben Tzorer Umoreh. Rashi tells us that the consequence of having such a wife would end up with a Ben Tzorer Umoreh, a boy that rebels, that goes off the derech, that does bad things. When you read Rashi, Rashi seems a little bit odd, because Rashi tells us the following. Says Rashi, Im Nesa'a, if he marries that Eshet Yefat Toar, Sofo liot son'a, he ends up hating her. Shene'emar, ki tiena leish. That's the proof from the pasuk. The pasuk right away afterwards speaks about that. So therefore we have a proof from the pasuk, from the verse. Then Rashi says, Sofo lo'olit mimena ben tzorer umoreh. Eventually would have a child from her that would be ben tzorer umoreh, a rebellious child. Rashi doesn't bring a proof, although the proof is also in the pasuk. Rashi says a proof to the fact that he would end up hating this woman, but then the next very parasha that speaks about ben tzorer umoreh, Rashi doesn't say shene'emar like it says. Rashi doesn't bring a proof to that. And I was thinking, why not? And the answer could be very simple. Because the Torah only tells us things that are chidush, which means things that you wouldn't know otherwise. If a man marries Eshet Yefat Toar, I wouldn't know that he would end up hating her. Maybe they would live a good life together. So the Torah predicts, and the Torah tells us that you should know there's a punishment to marrying such a wife, that he ends up hating her. But then, the fact that he hates her will end up in a child that ben tzorer umoreh. For that I don't need a proof from the Torah, because that is the nature in life. Whenever a man doesn't have a good relationship with his wife, the child, almost impossible that will grow to be a healthy grown child, because usually health, mental health, being confident and growing correctly has much to do with the relationship of a man with his wife. If there's love in the house, if there's respect between the two, eventually the child sees that, he grows healthy, and he grows to be somebody that can continue doing the right thing. But if a child sees fighting in the house, hatred, cold, disrespect, it has a tremendous effect on him, and eventually that very child is affected, that he himself grows to be not well, he doesn't feel confident, he has low self-esteem. That's a consequence that the Torah doesn't even need to tell me, because that is something we know and we see in our own eyes. So the Torah only tells us, says Rashi, about chidush, that the fact that they'll have a child, the chidush that he'll marry a woman and he won't love her, that is a chidush. But the fact that he doesn't love her, and the consequence of that the child would be ben tzorer umoreh, that's not a chidush. For that Rashi doesn't say shene'emar, because it's not needed. That we can see without the Torah even telling us. Shabbat shalom.
שלום, שמי הרב שי תחן, ואני מקווה שנהניתם והחכמתם מהשיעור. אם יש לכם שאלה בהלכה, פנו אלינו לבית ההוראה במספר 347-666-3467. זה מספר בניו יורק, ולכן תוכלו לשאול במספר של וואטסאפ, והרבנים של בית ההוראה, ואני בכללם, ננסה לענות לכם בהקדם. שבת שלום.